Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something really fundamental in Earth's history. The Great Oxidation Event, the GOE.
Yeah, it's this incredible period, roughly 2.4 down to maybe 2.1 billion years ago.
Where the whole atmosphere just changed. Went from basically no oxygen to having it become a significant part.
A huge shift. And it wasn't gentle, which is why you hear other names for it too, right? Like the oxygen catastrophe.
Oxygen revolution, oxygen crisis. I've even seen oxygen holocaust used. Really dramatic term.
They certainly captured the life-altering scale of what happened. It wasn't just a minor tweak.
Definitely not. So our mission today for this deep dive is to sort of unpack that. What kicked it off? How do we even know it happened?
And what were the consequences, the ripple effects on the planet and life itself?
Exactly. Sort of your quick guide to this massive turning point. Okay, so
Yeah.
the trigger. What actually started pumping out all this oxygen?
Well, the primary driver, the main story everyone points to, is the evolution of oxygenic photosynthesis.
In cyanobacteria, right? Those early microbes.
That's the one. They figured out this amazing trick. Use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to make energy. And crucially, they released oxygen as waste.
Like a planetary scale exhaust fume almost.
Mm-hmm.
CO2 plus H2O gives you energy plus O2.
Pretty much, yeah. That's a simplified version, but here's the puzzle.
There's always a wrinkle.
Right. We think cyanobacteria might have evolved quite a bit earlier, maybe 3.2 billion years ago. Some evidence suggests oxygen might have been bubbling away locally in the oceans even by 3 billion years ago.
Okay, so if they started making oxygen potentially hundreds of millions of years earlier, why the big delay? Why didn't the atmosphere change right away? That seems odd.
It does, but early Earth had what we call oxygen sinks, basically stuff that oxygen loves to react with.
So the oxygen was being made, but it was getting gobbled up immediately.
Exactly. Think of it like trying to fill a leaky bucket. In the oceans, the big sink was dissolved iron. Loads of it back then.
Okay.
So the oxygen comes along, reacts with the iron, and it forms iron oxides, essentially rust, that then settle down on the seabed.
Ah, and that's where those banded iron formations come in, the BIFs.
Precisely. Those layers of iron oxide and chert, a type of silica rock. They're incredibly common in rocks older than about 1.8 billion years.
And they peak around 2.5 billion years ago. So that peak is showing us the oceans acting as this giant oxygen sponge.
That's a great way to put it. And the fact that BIFs become much rarer after about 1.8 billion years ago, that suggests the oceanic iron sink was, largely filled up. The oceans themselves were becoming oxygenated, at least in shallower parts.
Okay, so BIFs are like the ocean's diary entry. What about on land? Any clues there?
Yep. We look for red beds. These are sandstones and shales that have this distinct reddish color.
Like rust-colored rocks.
Exactly. That color comes from iron minerals like hematite being oxidized, rusted by oxygen in the atmosphere as the sediments were being deposited or buried.
And when did these start showing up widely?
Around 2.3 billion years ago. Before that, sediments deposited on land generally aren't red, so the appearance of widespread red beds signals enough free oxygen in the air to start rusting iron on the continents.
Interesting. So BIFs for the ocean, red beds for the air.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, maybe more? Chemical?
Absolutely. There's a really specific chemical fingerprint involving sulfur isotopes. It's called mass-independent fractionation of sulfur, or MIF.
MIF-FSIS. Okay, sounds complex.
It is a bit, but the key takeaway is this specific MIF signature is only found in rocks older than about 2.4 to 2.3 billion years ago.
And then it just disappears.
Vanishes from the rock record. And the only way, really, for that MIF signature to be preserved is if there's virtually no oxygen in the atmosphere. Its disappearance tells us oxygen must have crossed a critical threshold.
Still probably tiny compared to today, but enough to shut down that MIF process.
Exactly. Maybe less than 100,000th of today's level, but chemically significant. A game changer for atmospheric chemistry.
Okay, so the evidence seems pretty solid. Oxygen is building up now.
Mm-hmm.
Those dramatic names. Catastrophe. Crisis. What was the impact on life that was already around?
Well, for the existing life, which was mostly anaerobic, meaning it didn't use oxygen and in fact found it toxic, this was bad news.
Right. Oxygen was poisonous to them.
Highly reactive, damaging stuff if you're not equipped to handle it. So the rise of oxygen likely caused a massive extinction event for many of these anaerobic microbes, hence oxygen catastrophe.
A tough time for the old guard, but did it create opportunities?
Huge ones. Because while oxygen was toxic to some, it also enabled a new, much more powerful way to get energy. Aerobic respiration, breathing oxygen.
Which gives you way more bang for your buck energy-wise than anaerobic processes.
Much more. So organisms that evolved to use oxygen had a massive metabolic advantage. It really set the stage for, well, for more complex life.
Does this tie into the appearance of eukaryotes, our kind of cells, with a nucleus and mitochondria?
Very likely, yes. Eukaryotes show up in the fossil record around, say, 1.8 billion years ago, significantly after the GOE got going.
And they need more energy.
Generally, yes. Their complexity, their organelles like mitochondria, which are basically the powerhouses running on oxygen, they demand more energy. The increased oxygen levels were probably crucial for their evolution and success.
And eventually leading towards multicellular animals, too.
That's the thinking. Multicellularity, especially active animal life, is very energy intensive. It's hard to imagine it happening without significant oxygen.
So huge impacts on life. What about the planet's climate system? Did dumping all this oxygen into the air change the temperature?
Oh, almost certainly. Before the GOE, methane was likely a much more abundant greenhouse gas, keeping the planet relatively warm.
Methane. Right, it's potent.
Very potent. But oxygen reacts with methane, breaking it down into CO2 and water, which are less potent greenhouse gases overall in that context.
So more oxygen means less methane, which means colder temperatures.
That's the leading theory. The rise in oxygen likely crashed methane levels, potentially triggering a massive cooling event. This lines up with evidence for the first major global glaciations, like the Huronian glaciation, happening around the same time as the GOE.
Wow, so it might have plunged the Earth into a deep freeze. It sounds like this wasn't just a switch flipped overnight then, more of a drawn-out process.
Definitely not overnight. More like stages. You had the initial whiffs of oxygen, maybe localized, then the sinks filling up, then oxygen starting to accumulate in the atmosphere and shallow oceans, and eventually leading to a more permanently, albeit still low-level oxygenated state compared to today. It took hundreds of millions of years to really unfold.
Right. So wrapping this up.
Yeah.
This deep dive really highlights the Great Oxidation Event as this truly transformative period kicked off by cyanobacteria.
Evidenced by those BIFs, the red beds, the disappearing mist signal.
And having these enormous knock-on effects, causing an extinction but also paving the way for complex life, maybe even freezing the planet for a while.
It fundamentally reshaped Earth's environment and the trajectory of evolution. A cornerstone event.
It really makes you pause and think, doesn't it? This ancient event, driven by microbes, literally laid the groundwork for the air you're breathing right now, for all the complex life we see.
The foundation was set billions of years ago.
What other seemingly small biological innovations or geological shifts back in deep time might have had similarly massive world-changing consequences that we're still trying to fully understand? Something to ponder. Thanks for exploring this with us.